Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Sunset Safari. And for those of you joining us for the first time, my name is Jamie, and I have Brian on camera with me this afternoon. We also have Tara and Nikki in FC. They will be directing myself and Brent, who is out with Steph and the wildebeest, Wiem, and they are out doing a little bit of experimentation with bushwalk styles and to see whether we can get bushwalks up and running without any audio or signal issues. So very, very exciting times lie ahead. Now, for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a live safari, so everything that you're seeing on your monitors right now is happening right here on Djuma and Arathusa Game Reserve in the Sabi Sands. And we're also interactive, so if you do have any questions for us or any comments that you would like to make, you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@WildEarthTV. And I'm currently sitting right in Impala Plains, just having a look to see if we could maybe follow up on where Brent and Steph last had Sindile or Madiba's tracks this morning. He is now known as Madiba, he is a year-old leopard cub. He's been moving around in this area, and he's been moving around on his own quite a bit away from his mother. And they last had tracks right in the middle of this block, so I did a little bit of a circuit just to see if we could see if he's popped out anywhere. It is a blazing hot day today. It's been very, very warm. There have been quite a few people in the swimming pool already at camp this afternoon. And it's probably around 28 degrees centigrade, which is very, very hot. It's even hotter in the sun. And why I chose to wear a long sleeve shirt this afternoon, I'm not quite sure. I kind of grabbed one in a rush and didn't really concentrate on what I was doing. Now, for those of you who might have missed the morning sunrise safari, we had a little bit of an update last night from the guides at Simbambili. And it seems as though the Birmingham boys were chasing and causing friction once again with the Nkuhumas. And this coming just a day or so after they've killed the last remaining young sub-adult female who was part of that pride. Now, the Birmingham boys after that moved across into Elephant Plains, where they are currently sleeping as we speak, unfortunately just to the west of our boundary with Arathusa. And the Nkuhuma pride crossed into Buffelshoek, and Brent found their tracks crossing there this morning. So the lions have spread off, and luckily spread off into different directions. And if I do hear any reports, I'm going to be listening regularly to the Arathusa Game Drive channel. And if we do hear any reports that the Birmingham boys look as though they might move east, then we'll be heading across there. But for now, there have been reports of a herd of elephants that were at Djuma Waterhole, or seen on the Djuma Waterhole camera. And those reports came from Morning Glory, so thank you for that. I did hear them from my house, or from my room at Inga's. They were trumpeting at each other. One thing I do want to do is just check in with Brent and see what his plans are. Last time we spoke, he was thinking of walking around that area, and obviously I want to make sure I know exactly where he is before we go bumbling in a vehicle. Brent for Jamie. Are you calling me earlier? You can go ahead. Okay, copy that. For now, I'm going to leave this area. I didn't pick up on any tracks coming out, and I'm going to head across those in Glove. Now, at the moment, Brent, Steph and the wildebeest are back into this block where they last had tracks for young Madiba, and they are searching around there to see if they can see him. I'm just making sure that there's no tracks coming out of the other side of this block. And I've noticed when he is on his own, he doesn't necessarily pick one direction and move in it. He entertains himself. So quite often I've seen him doubling back in different directions and just moving around without any real set or seemingly set plan on where he's going. The one thing we have noticed about him is that he's had to be fairly independent very early on. His mother, Shadow, for those of you who may be joining us and haven't got any background on these particular leopards, his mother, Shadow, came into estrus much earlier than would typically be normal for female leopards with cubs. She came into estrus a couple of weeks ago and disappeared off for what turned out to be over a week, and leaving him to fend for himself. Luckily, he's proving to be quite successful at catching little rodents and squirrels, although I believe he lost the gerbil that a couple of days ago that he caught. He's also become exceptionally playful, and he's always an entertaining character to watch. Checking at the moment very carefully in shade, flat on the ground or in the shady spots of termite mounds. He does seem to favor those. To do for now, whilst Brent and Steph and Liam are in that block, is obviously I don't want to cause too much noise in the area and distract them from hearing the important sounds that they might need to hear while they are on foot. So I'm going to continue on to where the elephants were seen, see if I can relocate that herd. We shall carry on from there. Way to go. Decisions. Both of these routes are fairly equidistant, but I think I'm going to go with the right hand turn. The other thing that I would very much like to do this afternoon, depending on how the plan goes, is to head across to the hyena den and see what activity is happening there. I haven't seen the smallest cub since I've got back to work. He wasn't out the last time that I was around that area. I'm hoping that he might be out and about and as playful and entertaining as he usually is. Been huge shifts in the lion dynamics in the lion population over the last few weeks of this area, especially with the Birmingham boys pushing the Matimba male lions down to the south. And there's been a question from OP as to whether or not the rangers and guides, are actually risking the lives of lions by showing them on this kind of program in order to give away their position to poachers. Now, the reason that this could have come to be is that while it's a wild earth policy that we do not show rhino, and as you will all know, I'm sure, there is an enormous crisis in terms of rhino poaching within South Africa at the moment. Last year alone, there was somewhere in the region of reported cases of 1,400 rhino being poached. So South Africa in particular has a serious problem in this area. So we do not show rhino, and we do not show any of their tracks, their territorial markings. That is the approach that we have. Now, I cannot personally think of the last time I've heard of a case of a lion being poached in the Sabi Sands. Although there is an enormous crisis with poaching of lions north of South Africa, towards the central areas of Africa, that is not the case here. And in fact, by the various guides and rangers moving through this area, one of the most important missions that we're trying to accomplish is to really raise awareness about how special these animals are and how to protect them and look after them. And it is such a vital part of the South African conservation industry, is so intimately connected to tourism. There is no way that we would in any way be endangering the various lions of this reserve. And we certainly, I know from a personal standpoint, and I know from the other guide's standpoint, there is no way we would show them if we thought it was going to do them any harm at all. And that comes from a personal promise from me personally, and I can say that I will speak for the rest of the Wild Earth team as well. And I have some very good news for those of you who are acquainted with our two vehicles. I'm currently sitting in the Jigger, who has so far been quite sturdy and steady since during Wendy's convalescence over the last few days. So Jack, just to let you know, Wendy is, as we speak, on her way to Hoedspruit to be thoroughly checked out by a professional vehicle mechanic, and she will hopefully be back up and running very, very soon. And it's important that we make sure that both of our vehicles are fully functional, but sometimes that just takes a little bit of time and a little bit of care. And obviously it needed to be done. Wendy's been very stoic in terms of putting up with everything that we subject these cars to in terms of driving every single day out here. But I think she just decided it was time for a break. And that just happened to coincide with the first summer rainfall. Now, I've mentioned that quite a lot because I'm just personally wondering what's going to happen over the next few months. I was very surprised by how early the rains came. I was definitely expecting a drought time. And I'm still wondering, this very often happens that you get the early spring rains. It happened last year as well. We had a nice big downpour in September and then very little after that. And I'm hoping against hope that this will not prove to be the case this year, and we will get a little bit of extra rain. We certainly need it. But it only takes a couple of hot blistering afternoons like this one before all of that groundwater starts to disappear and all of the good work of those big rains starts to dry up. quarantine clearings, which I'm going to bypass and loop around some of the drainage lines. It sounded to me this afternoon that the elephants were moving south from the dam once they'd left the dam. I'm going to start by following up there. The birds are quiet this afternoon. I was driving down this road after the sunrise safari this morning with Liam just after we'd closed the show, and we happened to see a lilac-breasted roller who was chasing and mobbing a turtle dove, a Cape turtle dove, which is very strange to me. I mean, I know that they can be a little bit aggressive at times, but I certainly have absolutely no idea as to why this particular roller took probably one of the least offensive birds and decided that it wasn't welcome in the area. I think because it is breeding season for most of these birds. Here we go, I've got the Ellies. They are tucked away across the drainage line, so they must have somehow looped the house without me even realizing it. But luckily there's a road that runs just around there, so hopefully we can get a bit closer and have a nice look at them. They do seem to be on the move. Trying to work out my best angle of approach because there is a drainage line in the way. Let's loop round and see which particular herd this is. I'm still secretly hoping for my first view of Mr. Wrinklybottom, who I've heard so much about but have yet to officially been introduced to. I think I saw the herd that he belongs to the other morning, but I didn't see him. And it was in a very, very thick block on quite a windy, cloudy day, so I didn't want to bother them too much. And for those of you who aren't too sure what I'm talking about, Mr. Wrinklybottom is a baby elephant with a very large personality, apparently. He likes to come and do little dances in front of the car. So I'm secretly hoping that this is who we've got now. Amazing how much moisture the ground has still retained, despite the fact that it's been completely dry since Saturday. The soil there is still fairly waterlogged. It's most impressive. Okay, Ellies, let's see how we can get to you. I know that this block starts to open up a little bit further on, so I'm going to go past them and loop back in around. It is one of those advantages of getting to know an area a little bit better. It's always a bit tricky when you start, but it helps a lot to spend a bit of time out in the bush, and then you get to know where there are good places to get your vehicle in. One thing about this area is that it is a seep line, so we've got to be careful about off-roading. Hello zebbies, zebras and elephants, how lovely. Stop while we have a moment with the zebras. Got quite a small herd here, and it looks to me to be a young bachelor herd. That's of zebras. Hello boy. And I'm hoping that once the rains do come, some of the zebra will stick around. I might decide to move further south towards the southern rivers, so towards the Sand River, where grazing, summer grazing, might be a little bit more fruitful for them. My prediction will probably be, if we do get big rains, we will see less and less zebra for a while, but that doesn't last forever. And the ellies, just to give you an idea of where we are just out of view, just behind and to the right of the zebra. So they are around. There's also a squirrel shouting off in the distance. Just want to sit for a moment, listen to what he has to say. And that to me doesn't carry the hint of serious alarm that usually accompanies a leopard or a lion sighting by a squirrel. I think it's probably to do with, quite possibly even to do with another squirrel that he's shouting at. Now, as wonderful as these zebras are, I do want to get closer to the ellies before we quite possibly lose them into the drainage line that's on the other side. And there is an ellie just above where you can see the zebra's shoulder or the middle of its back. I just saw the tail swish. Maybe it'll swish again. There you go. There's the bottom moving off right at the top of your screens, right in the middle. That's where the ellies are. I want to always come back and have a look at these beautiful zebra in a moment. Let's try and get to the elephants. And I've just popped my car into low range for two reasons. One, we're going off-road. We're going off-road quite close to, not in a seep line, but quite close to a seep line. And two, it keeps the revs down, so we don't stress out the animals in any way. I also don't particularly want to drive off-road in this area. I don't want to drive over some of the plant life that's there, which I will come back and show you in a moment. There's a lot of baboon's tail growing here, so I'm going to move around that. Oh, and I'm always so excited to see elephants. They really are special to me. I love spending time with them. There's something infinitely calming about the presence of a large elephant, and infinitely entertaining about the presence of a little one. Trying to loop my way ahead of the herd, with them front on. This is not the best view just yet, but they are making their way towards us. I don't want to crash forward too much into her personal space. At the moment, only got a visual of 3 of them. She's currently munching on those baboon's tail, which I mentioned I didn't want to. I'm not sure if you picked up on that, but there was a nice low rumble from this big female here. The rest of the herd is here. They've moved off into quite a thick part of this drainage line. And if this lot decide to go the same way, then we probably wouldn't be the best idea to go and follow them. We'll have to loop around and catch them coming out the other side. A couple of younger ones. And a very tiny, probably around 2.5-year-old at the back there. Hello, big girl. Yeah, just catching the green shoots of the baboon's tail. She is on the move again, and I think that rumble was to tell the youngster to come with her. And that youngster is probably around 5 years old or so. It's got the beginnings of its permanent tusks coming through. Maybe even a bit older looking at its height, maybe even around 6.5. She is moving off into quite a thick block. But I am hoping that they are going to choose to come out on the other side. Just because I know that area fairly well and it opens up beautifully on the other side. And there's a bit more in terms of feeding potential. There you can see a little one also enjoying the green shoots of the baboon's tail. Oh, there's nothing like sitting near an elephant when it makes that low frequency communications rumble. It can be so special. youngsters seemingly reluctant to follow on behind the adult, particularly this little one in the back. But maybe sometimes it takes a little bit more time and coordination to really make the most of the feeding opportunities available to you. There goes Mom. And you can see how thick it is just in front of her. Obviously, we're not going to go crashing after a breeding herd of elephants there. I'm also just going to hop onto the Game Drive channel just to let people know that, in particular, I'm thinking of Brent, Steph and Liam. Depending on where they've chosen to go walking next, I just want them to know that there is a breeding herd of eddies making its way towards them. Just want to double check the direction of the drainage line. Just have to wait for the conversation on the Game Drive channel to finish. Just going to get us into a slightly clearer position, in particular because I'd like to have a look at some of the youngsters. Let's shift around so we can get our glimpse of them before they disappear into that thick bush there, although hopefully to re-emerge on the other side. And while I do that, let me just take this opportunity to call this in. Stations I've got Shlambi and Love here, Finns Road, mobile south towards Women's Cup Line. Just make our way in nice and slowly and calmly. Let's just have a look at the little individual that's feeding on the baboon's tail there. I want to chat a little bit about his tusks and about aging little elephants. Now you can see he's just got the points starting to come through. And Lindsay wanted to know, at what age do elephants start developing their tusks, or which time do they start appearing? And the wonderful thing that not many people know about little baby elephants is that they have, first of all, they get a set of milk tusks, because tusks are, after all, teeth. And like most baby mammals, they'll have a chance to just have tiny little tusks that will then fall out. And they will then grow their permanent tusks at around sort of 5 years old. So those milk tusks will start developing around 6 months old and then fall out. And if we can maybe, when this little one to the left of me starts to move through, although he's just hiding at the moment, but maybe we can have a look. I can just see the tiny points of his milk tusks showing through. Oh, he's going to disappear. Stop, little one. I could just see them when he had his head tilted towards me. They're quite well hidden now. You just see poking out. And somebody is trying to call me on the Game Drive channel. There you can see just a little bit of the milk tusk poking through. And that will soon be replaced by permanent tusks. This isn't that young of an elephant now that I'm looking at it. 2.5 to 3. And they will then, once their permanent tusks come out, they will then continue to grow throughout their lives. Just bear with me for 1 second. I just want to get hold of Craig. He's trying to get hold of me. Yeah, Craig, standing by. Oh, good afternoon. I'm good, thanks. And you? Negative, not as far as I know. I know that he had tracks for Shadows Bontuan, south of Power Lines Road, somewhere between Impala Plains and Power Lines Road. I think he might be following up in that area now. Okay, copy. I'm with Shlomo and Lov now, but I'll follow up later. Sorry guys, just taking a moment to listen to Craig's update. He's just telling me that apparently he heard alarm calls in the drainage line in the Mulwati as he was making his way up Twin Dams, but he couldn't go and investigate because he was surrounded by probably this particular herd of elephant. But they've moved off now, so I think he's going to follow up from there. I'm going to loop around one more time and see if we can get one last visual of them as they start to move off. I'm quite surrounded by the baboon's tail plants that they are eating, so I'm going to try and duck and weave my way around them. Elephants are amongst some of the most incredible mammals that are out here in terms of their levels of their knowledge and understanding. And we were talking about the fact that the babies have milk teeth that push through, and then the permanent teeth that push through. And those of you who do have babies, or in the case of pet puppies or kittens, furry babies, you will know that at that time all they want to do is chew things when their teeth are coming through. Now, it's just the same with baby elephants. So it does cause them a level of irritation and discomfort that upsets them a little bit. And they're very, very clever, because what they will do is they will go and find a plant with astringent properties. So something like a silver cluster leaf, which we have in this area, as well as the spike thorn trees. And I've spoken before about what it tastes like to eat those. It almost sucks away your saliva, and it's got a very, very astringent feel. It makes your mouth go a little bit numb. And the baby ellies have learned that this is a really good way of relieving the pain in their mouths when their teeth start to come through. So how amazing is that? They even know how to treat their own medical complaints. I've also read about elephants consuming tambuti trees, which are highly, highly toxic to people. But if they're feeling a little bit sick, they've got some form of stomach complaints, they will go and purge themselves by eating tambuti trees. So really quite phenomenal creatures. This is a very, very large herd of elephants. They're moving, I can see them moving off in the distance all around me. I'm sticking with this particular group because we've had a nice view of them so far. But there's still a distinct possibility that this could be Wrinkly Bottom's herd. Hello, big girl. And that's what the low frequency rumbles are that we've been hearing. There's just communication between them, between the herd members. Hello, little one. And those rumbles are a fantastic form of low frequency communication between the herd members. So although this group has stayed back a little bit from the rest of the herd, which have already moved through the drainage line and up to the other side, they all know where they are. Now Lynn was watching and has heard that the elephants' low frequency rumbles can be heard by other elephants up to 7 miles away, which for those of us who work in kilometers is probably about 15 to 16 kilometers away. And that's absolutely true, and in some cases it can be even further, so 20 to 40 kilometers. There's even some scientists who claim that it can travel up to even more than that, so more than 50 kilometers in distance, which is more than, quick maths, 20 odd miles. And the reason behind that is because it is such a low frequency rumble. So they create the ones that we've heard now at the moment while they're moving through this area, but they can actually produce rumbles in their chest that are even lower in frequency that the human ear can't even pick up on. They are so low. And because they are so low, it means that the wavelengths they are producing are much, much longer and can travel much further distances. That's why whale sounds are so deep as well, because they travel the furthest if they are low frequency sounds. And you have to wonder about the connection between the largest land mammal in this area versus the largest sea mammal. They seem to have adopted very similar approaches to low frequency, long distance communication. I do just want to get onto the game drive. I want to just get into contact with Brent, who is probably in the block a little bit to the west of me, just to let him know that these elephants have now changed direction and are very much in the way on their way towards him. Now, we've been talking about the low frequency rumbles, and Gilly was telling us about the experience that she had whilst watching Mark, who is one of the previous presenters of Wild Earth. And apparently the elephants all paused mid-step and picked up the low frequency communication through the soles of their feet, and then continued on walking 10 seconds later once the rumbles were over. And Gilly, welcome to the Sunset Safari. You were wondering if I've ever experienced this kind of communication, and I most definitely have in the past. I've seen them do it several times over. I've also seen their reactions where you can just tell that the herd members, even though it's not a sound that you can hear, you can tell that the herd members are communicating to each other whilst interacting with you. And I had that once where I was surrounded by elephants, and it was like somebody had flicked a switch and they all went completely still and silent and stopped to have a look at me. I'm just making my way back towards the road. This is quite a large herd of elephants, and I can see more of them heading into a more nice open area. So I'm going to go and see if we can catch up with them there first. And while I do that, let me try once again to get hold of either Steph or Brent. Brent for Jamie. Almost back to the road. Then we can loop around and catch up with these ellies on the other side. Now, it seems as though Brent and Steph and Liam are now on their way back to fix up some signal issues, so they're no longer walking in this area. However, Craig is once again trying to get hold of me, so let me just answer him quickly. Yeah, standing by. Okay, copy that. Craig, Brent's having some signal issues, so they've gone back towards DRC. It sounded like in the middle of the block between Impala Plains and Power Lines Road. Let's loop around to the entrance to the old hyena den, see if we can catch these ellies from there. There's lots of little baby elephants in this herd. I've seen all of them ranging from about what looked like about 2 years old all the way up to 8 or 9. And while we're making our way back towards the herd from a different direction, Isabella, who is 4 years old, wanted to know if baby elephants go to school. Now, Isabella, welcome to the Sunset Safari. It is wonderful to have you with us, and I hope you're enjoying seeing the little ellies as they move through. Now, Isabella, they don't go to school in the way that human beings go to school, but they still do a lot of learning, and they'll learn not just from their mothers, who teach them everything they know about what they can eat, where they should drink, where to sleep, what's safe, what to be scared of, when to listen, but they'll also learn from their aunties and their older sisters and their older brothers. They learn so much from each other. And when they get to be a little bit older, so once they start to see other babies being born, then they'll also start to teach those younger babies and look after those younger babies themselves. So it's a very, very tight-knit family, and so you could almost think of them as being homeschooled. And what an amazing schooling experience that must be. More ellies here. They have moved through the drainage line. Driving becomes a little bit more tricky on this road after the rains. Let's see if we can get a nice clear view of the rest of the herd. They're spread out all the way through this block. Some of them are quite well tucked away in the drainage line as well. Again, lots and lots of baboon tail that I don't want to drive over. Hello guys. Let's see if we can do this carefully. It is such a cool experience, just sitting in the middle of quite a nice view in this area, and everywhere I look I see a different group of ellies moving through. Definitely one of my favorite things to experience. Let's make sure I don't go squishing any of this special plant. Let's just stop here for one moment, just to... I can't actually push any further without doing a bit of damage, which I don't want to do. But they are making their way towards us. And so far I've done a rough count in my head. And I've counted probably about 12 adults and somewhere in the region of 6 babies. So it is quite a big herd. I'm not sure if this is the same herd that was seen on the Djuma dam camera. Perhaps if you guys could let me know how many came down to the dam there. I suspect it is. Oh, I'm just going to casually lift and roll over an entire tree to get to something at the base. And it's always an important lesson when you watch an elephant do something like that, as to how incredibly strong they really are. This is not a particularly large individual, but she decided that there was something there that she really wanted, and she was going to get it. Now, I mentioned a little bit earlier that I was trying to get hold of Brent just to make sure that the bushwalk team were aware of the fact that there were ellies moving towards them. And I was doing that just as a precaution, because I know that between Brent and Steph, one of them definitely would have heard the ellies approaching, and they are approaching very slowly. They're feeding, They're making quite a bit of noise. But if they had been encountered on foot, it would very much depend on the situation. Now, probably what would happen if they had encountered them on foot, as I said, it depends on the situation. So it depends on the distance and it depends on the direction of the wind. It is more preferable to approach elephant breeding herds on foot if you really have to, or if you have been approached by them. It's much more preferable to have it on a still afternoon rather than a windy day, especially if the wind is swirling. Because not only is their sense of smell incredibly sensitive, but they're also just that little bit more on edge on windy days. It makes them a little bit grumpy and a little bit more volatile. But most important, it's important to remember to have safe ground to retreat to, and having a nice drainage line like the one that we're at now in between you, maybe using a little bit of extra height on a termite mound or a big tree. And the best way, of course, to view them is without them even realizing that you're there, which means some stealthy creeping, possibly keeping your shape down low to the ground. And in my experience, when I have been spotted by breeding herds, they do come up to investigate, especially the older females, and they start to form very defensive behavior. So they'll form a tight ring with the babies at the back. They'll come and stand between you, the threat, and their babies. And what often helps to diffuse that situation, it does very much, is entirely circumstantial, but what you can do is just duck down slightly, and that immediately converts your posture from the threatening human bipedal shape to something a little bit lower and less threatening. And that's generally been my approach with breeding herds. Of course, it then is dependent on how they respond from there, because sometimes you do need to make yourself a little bit bigger and shout a bit if they start to come too close. The other thing that I have learned in terms of elephant sightings on foot is that it's very, very important not to surprise them. Now, for animals this big, you'd be surprised at how fast they can move and how easily they can sneak up on you when you're out in the bush. And if you do hear them coming and you know that there is a moment of sort of, not collision, but they are going to come straight towards you and there is no chance of you remaining unseen, then the last thing you want to do is surprise them at the last minute when they're too close to you. And in that case, you step out and actually present yourself to the elephants. Make sure that they know that you are there in very good time at a nice far distance, so that they can then choose if they want to change their route or how they want to respond. It's far, far better than surprising or sneaking about. Very often animals get a little bit suspicious if they know that you're there but you're trying to hide and you're trying to whisper. And it's in certain circumstances, reading their body language, it's better to present yourself to them. And this little baby is probably still very young, probably in the region of about 1.5 to 2 years old. Now, I mentioned earlier that elephants have a great way of treating their upset stomachs by consuming tambueti trees, which acts as gives it a sort of a purgative effect. And Tessa from Toronto, welcome to the Sunset Safari. You've asked a question that I don't know the answer to, and that's whether or not elephants throw up. Now, I would think not, just in terms of their body structure. But I'm just sitting here thinking about it. I'm really not sure. I don't think so. I'm trying to think of the structure of their stomachs, of their intestines. I haven't even really seen an elephant with diarrhea. So that's a brilliant question. I might have to go and look that up. And maybe those of you with access to the World Wide Web, in a situation where I don't, can maybe have a look and see if there are any recorded cases of elephants throwing up. Because that is a truly fascinating situation. And you can send through any feedback on that subject to #SafariLive on Twitter, or through to questions@WildEarthTV. And naturally, I'm very curious to hear what the answers are. I'm just trying to picture it, and it's the most absurd image. Brian, can you imagine an elephant trying to throw up? Shame. I think it would be very tricky to do. Now, this little group that we've been sitting with isn't the clearest. They are all slowly making their way to a more open area. I'm just double checking behind me to see where the rest of the group has gone. And there's more coming up along the drainage line as well. You can see that these eddies are not in too much of a hurry. They're just doing a late afternoon feeding session. And at this time of the year, it's very common for them to be as spread out as far as they are. And that's because there's not much nutritional value at the moment in the plant life around us. So they need to spread out and make sure they're not all concentrated and feeding in one place. Now, we're on the crest of a hill, so it's maybe not the best place for it, although there are a couple of knobthorns here. In the next sort of 2 or so weeks, or 3 weeks, the knobthorns are going to start growing their leaves. They're one of the first trees to get their brand new spring leaves. And at that point, there'll be a lot of bulls moving through along with the females. They're going to push over some of the bigger trees. And then you will start to see the whole herd moving around one tree and feeding off it. So you'll start to see them be a little bit more concentrated in terms of their feeding. Now, our ellies have tucked themselves away into a drainage line, and I can see another individual behind me, so I'm going to make my way that side and see if we can get a nice clear view. Now, this morning on the sunrise safari, Liam spotted the first sort of green grass shoots that have started to come through. And of course, we've got all of these baboon tail plants, which I promise I will stop and talk about once we're done with the ellies, because they are really fascinating plants. And Laura's picked up on the fact that it has started to go green, and the bush has been looking over the last few weeks very brown, very sort of blue-grey in colour, and it's nice to start seeing the fresh new growth for all of these animals, and it must come as such a huge relief to them. And I'm not sure whether I was imagining it, but I swear after the first rains, that first afternoon and the first morning after that when I went out, everything seemed to be in really high spirits. And I might just have been imagining it because that's what I was thinking about, but I think that the animals were very, very happy. I'm just going to stop and have a look at this Ellie here, who's making short work of a tree that I need my binoculars in order to identify. Looks like a combination of a guarri and something else growing there. Combination of blue and magic guarri. Not often you see them feeding on that. And playing a little bit of hide and seek with us as well. And this little Ellie who's coming through now watched us very suspiciously for a while as we made our entrance, and didn't seem to be too keen on our arrival. Obviously relaxed now, and that is such a fun age, that sort of 5 to 8 year old range that this Ellie falls into, because they are very, very playful and they are still learning the various boundaries. So they like to either come up and say hello or give you a little bit of a fun charge. Not that there's ever a fun charge, but if you could describe it as that, just a way of testing out their level of influence on their world around them. I'm curious to see if it's going to come and say hello to us at some point. It's going to be brave enough. I'm just going to answer Craig's radio call for a moment. Standing by. Copy that, thanks. When I'm done with these and love, then I'll come and give you a hand in that area. You can see the characteristic flapping of the ears. It is nice and warm, even now. And I think this will probably be one of the first evenings where I haven't needed a jacket with me on drive. I've still got it, just in case, never fear. That's a very sweet little image. 2 Ellies tucked away behind a guarri bush, having quite the snack. And we mentioned earlier what a bizarre image it is to imagine an elephant throwing up. I really am very curious about this situation now. I'm dying to know if elephants actually do or if they don't. But Tony has suggested that if they do, then it would be advisable to stand well back. And I do think he is absolutely right about that. Hello, big girl. Where are you off to? Now, I believe that we have a viewer named Steve. Oh, are you going to come through, little one? Sorry, Steve. I promise I'll get back to you in a moment. Just want to see what this little one has to say. Not much. Off again. One bodily function that the elephants have just demonstrated, as they do on a regular basis, is that they are exceptionally flatulent. Oh. Just hold on one moment, guys. I need to just hop on the radio. And I will get back to poor Steve's question. Craig for Jamie. Now, Steve has been joking that he has not had a question answered yet on Wild Earth. So Brian and myself are going to break that particular pattern, and we're going to answer Steve's question about what a baboon-tailed plant is. He was wondering exactly what they are. So we're going to have a look at one, and we've got quite a few of them just off to my right in this area. And that is a baboon's tail plant with fresh green shoots that the elephants in this area have clearly been enjoying a great deal. And the reason it is called a baboon's tail, funnily enough, is supposedly the end of it looks a little bit like the end of a baboon's tail. Very imaginative. Personally, I don't think I've ever seen a baboon with a tail that looks like that. But the one thing about it is it's a very, very dense plant material. Now I'm looking for some dried one. It's not often that you find an old dead one. And obviously I don't want to pick a live one. I'm just listening to the Game Drive channel. Just bear with me for one moment. Now it sounds as though Craig has located Karula around the lodge. Unfortunately, she's just ducked into the drainage line, so he has lost visual of her at the moment. But I think it's time we go and help him find her. Let's see if maybe we can give him a hand. Let me go and help Craig keep an eye on her. Let's try and get out of here and move fairly quickly. And I know Karula of old. She's in that exact block where I've lost her twice before. So I'm hoping Craig can keep her for us. Craig for Jamie. Craig, I'd like to respond as well. If she does disappear, then maybe I can help her locate. Okay, copy. How many stations responding? Copy that. Now Steve, just to finish off with your question, because I can't actually Ferrari safari out of an elephant sighting, it's definitely going to cause some upset amongst the herd members. The baboon's tail is a great way that the bushmen used to utilize. What they would do is they would hollow it out and they would pack it with a burning coal or a burning ember from the fire. And they would use that as a way of transporting fire from place to place. If they moved about from one night to another and they moved their camping site, then they would carry that coal so they wouldn't have to go through the somewhat labor-intensive process of starting a fire manually with 2 sticks or with some rocks. So a very, very useful plant in terms of helping them out in that respect. A little bit further out now. We can start to make our way. I do want to get there as quickly as possible. I know Karula of old now. I'm learning my lesson. And I've also learned a little bit about that block that she's in at the moment. It's the block between Mvubu and Gari cut line, which is a little bit of a nightmare at times. I'm trying to think of the fastest way. It's definitely going to be this way. As we leave these ellies, and I am just making sure I'm not driving too fast around these corners. Obviously I don't want to bump into them whilst driving at high speed. And that is exactly why. That was a good call. I think that would have made Mommy Ellie very unhappy if we'd gone barging in here. I'm just going to stop here for a moment. I'm not going to block the path for these two little ellies. Hello, little ones. You're definitely not interested in the fact that we are trying to get to Karula, are you? And just while we're looking at them, got some information about whether or not elephants throw up. Yes, hello. You're very scary. Oh, you're very big and scary. Now, apparently they have a connection between the back of their throat and into their trunk, in the same way that we do, and Jan suggests it would be unlikely that they would throw up because of the possibility of food making its way into the back of their trunk and possibly even causing an infection if it gets stuck there. And I do think that's a very valid point. They've got a very, very long nasal passage. I'm just listening with half a brain to the Game Drive channel. Rula seems to be doing her usual trick of ducking and diving. Thank you, Elise. And there's also been a comment that elephants have been known to regurgitate water, especially females over babies, to cool them down. And that's definitely something I'd never heard about. So those comments came from John and from Deborah, and thank you for your answers. It's always great to have an audience that gives that kind of feedback. Thank you for that. I'm still going to go and look into the matter of elephant vomiting and find out what goes on there. take the opportunity to have a quick drink as well. It's really, really hot this afternoon. To Philemon's Dip. Susie has pointed out that Karula is probably already in the lodge area. She is a notoriously sneaky leopard. And it does sound as though both Craig and Tex have lost sight of her. The one thing about that block is it's filled with drainage lines, which I know that she knows and she likes to disappear off into. I just wanted to check in with Craig and see where he would like me to approach from. Craig or Tex for Jamie. Craig, just wanted to check whether you wanted me to come from the Gallagher shortcut side or from around the dam side. Copy that, thank you. I'll come from Gallagher shortcut. Seems as though the two guides there have lost visual of her, and I must say I sympathize with that completely, especially in that area. But let's go see if having a third set of eyes, or third and fourth set of eyes, counting Brian, might give them a little bit of a hand. Just listening to the Game Drive channel because the situation is changing all the time. Exactly where there was a suggestion that she was, which is in the drainage line. It sounds like in front of the lodge. So I'm making my way around to this side. we make our way into that drainage line, it seems as though Brent and Steph are back up and running with the bushwalk. So we're going to cut across to them, and I will be back with you a little bit later, hopefully with Karula, who hasn't been seen in quite a while. Welcome back, and Brian and myself are still on our mission to get to Karula. I'm just going to get into contact with Craig about his exact position. Let's see if we can get some clarification. Ooh. Hello, Ellies. Oh, elephants everywhere today. Come back to you guys. We've got a leopard to find at the moment, but you know, just stick around. We'll be back with you later. Start keeping our eyes peeled, Brian. She was moving in this direction. Craig said she's in a drainage line. There's quite a few of those around here. Just check in there. One nice thing about the fact that she's on the move, although she is so sneaky, that hopefully something will spot her and give us alarm calls to let us know exactly where she is. Standing by. Okay, copy. I'm just coming from the shortcut onto Mvubu now. Exactly how far up in Mvubu were you? Okay, copy. I wasn't there for that sighting. Is it more towards the dam or further north along the route? Okay, copy that. I will approach from the eastern side where I see all the tracks going off-road. Okay, copy that. Then I'll make my way around as well. There we go. That's where she was. Now Craig tells me that she's moved west across the drainage line, and he suggested to me that it's going to be almost impossible to go across. Standing by.